tax-free. Is she living in poverty?
Doesn't sound like it.
No, but your Census Bureau counts her as being poor. I'm not saying take away her benefits. I'm saying give the American people a little credit.
Senator John Kennedy just used a hearing with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to make an argument about one of the most consequential numbers in American policy, the poverty rate. The Census Bureau, which falls under Lutnick's department, says roughly 11% of Americans live at or below the poverty line. Kennedy walks Lutnick through how that figure is built and lands on a claim that the official measure counts only cash income while ignoring food stamps, Medicaid, housing subsidies, and refundable tax credits. Count all of it, Kennedy argues, and the real rate is closer to 1%. Lutnick, agreeing, says it sounds like something they should change. It's a real debate in economics, and it deserves the full, honest picture, including the part Kennedy leaves out. Watch this. If you want to support the channel and get exclusive videos, kindly hit the join button below. That's how we keep this going.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Mr. Secretary, the Census Bureau is under your jurisdiction, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And the Census Bureau is in charge of defining what it means to be poor or in poverty in America. Is that correct?
I think it does economic analysis for America.
But it also defines poverty level, does it not?
I don't know if it's the defining
well, you need
Bureau.
to look, because it does.
Okay.
If you know, this isn't a quiz, if you know, what's the percentage of Americans who live at or below the poverty level?
I don't know the percentage.
Okay, it's around 11%. It's been constant. Now, when the Census Bureau defines poverty, they do it by income. You're aware of that. When the Census Bureau defines poverty using income, they only count income that the individual earns or cash income that the individual gets from the federal government. Is that correct?
Well, it includes all sources of their income. I mean, that is the purpose.
Yeah, their income and cash income from the federal government. Is that correct?
Oh, meaning does it include income that they receive from the federal government?
Yeah, cash.
I think so.
Yeah. So if a person makes $11,000 a year, that's considered toward poverty level. But if the person gets a cash payment, let's say in the form of SSI or TANF, that counts too. Is that right?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Are you aware that your agency doesn't count non-cash payments from the federal government defining poverty?
I am not.
Are you aware that your agency doesn't count refundable earned income tax credits or food stamps or housing subsidies or utility bill subsidies or Medicaid or free school meals? They don't count that. They call it a non-cash payment and it doesn't count. You aware of that?
It sounds to me that you and I are going to spend some time together and we're going to change it, but I did not know that, and it sounds like something that we should add.
And the purpose of my questioning is not to punish people who need help. The American people are the most generous people in the world. That's why we spend $1.4 trillion a year helping people that other countries would allow to die in a ditch. But your Census Bureau says it's 11% who live at or below the poverty level. That's a lie. It's 1%. If you count as any person with a brain above a single cell organism would, cash and non-cash payments, they're above the poverty level. And we ought to be honest with the American people and thank them for getting the poverty level down to 1% instead of giving them a curb stomping and calling them selfish. Let me give you a real life example here. Let's suppose you've got a mom and 2 kids. According to your Census Bureau, the poverty level for her is $27,000. She makes $11,000 a year, let's say. So she's below the poverty level. But she also qualifies for $3,400 in refundable tax credits based on her $11,000 salary, $9,200 in food stamps, that's for her and her 2 children, $9,500 in housing subsidies, $900 in utility bill subsidies, $16,000 in Medicaid, $3,100 a year in free school lunches, and $6,600 a year in TANF. That's $64,100 a year, tax-free. Is she living in poverty?
Doesn't sound like it.
No, but your Census Bureau counts her as being poor. I'm not saying take away her benefits. I'm saying give the American people a little credit. And I really think you need to change the definition to a definition that looks like somebody designed the damn thing on purpose. Final question, I'm going to hurry, Mr. Chairman. Why don't you just use satellite internet service? Why don't you just use Global Star or Starlink? You said the cost is $4,000 per person in Louisiana. For $600, you can buy a Starlink terminal. Why don't you just do that? And do it across America and save a bunch of money.
The states were responsible for determining the best outcome, and sometimes fiber in a dense location can be economically better. Sometimes satellite does not work best on geography.
It can't be cheaper. That's impossible. It can be cheaper.
Math is, each of the states did their best. We worked it out with them, and we moved on.
I just don't understand. You can buy, I'm not saying do Musk. There are others that just throw it out for bid. But $600 for a terminal versus $4,000 for fiber optic? This is taxpayer money. I'm done. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman. I should have known it's you, Shelley. You're much nicer than Jerry. He would have cut me off.
Yeah, Senator Shaheen.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. In your opening statement, you said the states chose to do it, meaning the BEAD program, the best way for their states. In 2023, NTIA allocated $196.5 million in BEAD funding to the state of New Hampshire based on a 5-year plan that were approved and submitted in 2024. And the state planned to develop broadband infrastructure by prioritizing fiber optic cables and hybrid fiber coaxial technologies. And I appreciate Senator Kennedy's question about satellite transmission, because in some places it does make sense, and as you pointed that out in your opening statement. But the reality is there are a lot of places where it doesn't make sense, because in states like New Hampshire, satellites are unreliable in severe weather. They have a shorter lifespan, and they require more maintenance than fiber optic cables. So as you pointed out, also, in a lot of places, it's actually better long-term to use those fiber optic cables. And one of the reasons that New Hampshire submitted a new plan was because on June 6th, your office said they had to come up with a low-cost, technology-neutral approach that's required by the new guidelines. But that approach was not what the state had determined was the best way to connect. And now we see that SpaceX in June 2026, who was in negotiations with New Hampshire, has sent a letter to states with a set of demands that would ensure Starlink receives federal grant money even when residents don't purchase Starlink broadband service. The demands would also guarantee that SpaceX gets paid even if it doesn't reserve large portions of Starlink network capacity for homes in the areas that are supposed to receive BEAD-funded internet service. So my question, Mr. Secretary, is, given that And given concerns that we're seeing in the state of New Hampshire, our state's going to be able to renegotiate with ISPs on the requirements of the program. If they're dealing with a company like SpaceX that is not agreeing to what has been determined to be the requirements of their grants?
Thank you. New Hampshire, we agreed with New Hampshire in November of 2025. So they were one of the first and one of the fastest to go for the new guidelines, and they did an excellent job. 67% is fiber, because they determined that was the best outcome. 21.5% was satellite, and then, the fixed wireless was about 11%. So they used a technology-neutral approach. They saved a lot of money, and they've done your broadband office did a great job. So I just
there's
want to
no doubt about that, but the percentages are not totally accurate, because in a state like New Hampshire, where we have a lot of small communities and rural populations, the percentages don't accurately reflect the households we need to reach if we're going to ensure 100% access to broadband service. And that's the issue that I'm raising with you, because right now we have a plan that has been revised, and as you point out, it has been approved. But the reality is over 1,000 households or 1,000 locations, it's about 1,106, I think, depend on adequate connections to Starlink. And right now, we're engaged in a debate over whether Starlink is actually going to provide that service that we're trying to contract for. So what I want to know is, if we have an ISP that is not willing to abide by the terms of the agreement, can states go out and get a new ISP that's actually going to provide by the terms of the agreement?
It is my understanding that SpaceX, as you correctly say, sent you a rider to modify
sent a number
the terms,
of states.
And they sent a number of states. That rider is outside of our guidelines, is outside the statute, and it is rejected by us. There will be no rider. And if SpaceX does not want to live without the rider, then you will definitely go find an alternative means of execution so you can deliver broadband to each and every one of the people in your state as you are entitled to and as we will deliver. So we are on the same side.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Let's be absolutely clear about what John Kennedy was doing in this exchange, because it deserves an honest treatment rather than a partisan one in either direction. Kennedy was making a genuine argument about how America measures poverty, an argument that contains a real legitimate point and also a significant leap that doesn't hold up. Viewers deserve both halves. The Census Bureau operates under the Department of Commerce, which is why Kennedy is raising this with Secretary Lutnick. And it's worth noting the tone. This is not a confrontation. Lutnick largely agrees with Kennedy, says he wasn't aware of the details, and suggests they work together to change the definition. So what's happening here isn't a takedown. It's a senator using a friendly witness to put an argument on the record. Now, the argument itself. The official poverty rate published by the Census Bureau is about 11%. And Kennedy is factually correct about a key limitation of how it's calculated. The official poverty measure, which dates back to the 1960s, counts a family's cash income, including wages and direct cash payments from government programs like supplemental security income and traditional welfare, but it does not count non-cash benefits. It leaves out the value of food stamps, Medicaid, housing subsidies, home energy assistance, free school lunches, and refundable tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Kennedy illustrates this with a detailed example. A single mother with 2 children faces a poverty threshold of about $27,000. She earns $11,000 from work. By the official measure, she's counted as poor. But Kennedy adds up everything else she receives. $3,400 in refundable tax credits, $9,200 in food stamps, $9,500 in housing subsidies, $900 in utility assistance, $16,000 in Medicaid, $3,100 in free school lunches, and $6,600 in cash welfare. His total comes to $64,000 a year, and he asks, is she living in poverty? His conclusion is that if you counted all cash and non-cash benefits, the real poverty rate would be closer to 1%, and that the government should be honest about how much support actually reaches low-income families. Here is the context that makes this an honest video instead of a misleading one, and it's the part almost no coverage of this clip will include. Kennedy frames the Census Bureau as if it hides this, but the Bureau recognized this exact critique decades ago, and since 2011, it has published a second parallel statistic called the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM. The SPM was created specifically to count the non-cash benefits Kennedy lists: food stamps, housing subsidies, refundable tax credits, and more. So the government does measure poverty the way Kennedy suggests it should. It publishes that number right alongside the traditional one. And here's the crucial part. When you use the supplemental poverty measure, poverty does not drop to 1%. In most years, it comes out remarkably close to the official measure, sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower. The reason is that the SPM doesn't just add benefits, it also subtracts the real costs the official measure ignores. It accounts for taxes families pay, work expenses like childcare and commuting, out-of-pocket medical costs, and critically, the wildly different cost of housing across the country. A family might receive substantial benefits and still fall short because rent in their city eats most of it. When the child tax credit was temporarily expanded in 2021, the SPM showed child poverty falling to a record low. And when that expansion expired, child poverty shot right back up. That's the measure working exactly as designed, capturing what the safety net does and doesn't cover. So Kennedy's underlying point that non-cash benefits are real and worth counting is legitimate, and economists across the political spectrum agree the 60-year-old official measure is outdated for exactly that reason. But the leap to poverty is really 1% doesn't survive contact with the fuller data because it counts every benefit at full value while ignoring every offsetting cost. Take his own example. He counts $16,000 of Medicaid as if it were cash in that mother's pocket. But Medicaid isn't spendable income. You can't pay rent or buy groceries with it. It has real value, but treating it as cash dramatically overstates a family's actual purchasing power. The same is true to varying degrees for several other benefits on his list. The honest takeaway is that both numbers tell you something true. The official rate shows how many families can't cover basic needs through their own earnings and cash assistance alone. The supplemental rate shows what happens after the full safety net and the full weight of real-world costs are accounted for. Poverty in America is neither as simple as 11% nor as dismissible as 1%. It's a genuine measurement question that serious people debate, and Kennedy raised a real piece of it, even if he oversold the conclusion. But here's what matters most, and it's the question the clip should leave people with. How you measure poverty determines who qualifies for help and how you judge whether programs work. If you adopt Kennedy's framing and declare poverty essentially solved, the logical next step is to cut the very benefits keeping those families afloat. The food stamps, the Medicaid, the housing aid, the tax credits. And the moment you cut them, poverty, by any honest measure, climbs right back because those benefits were the only thing bridging the gap between what families earn and what survival costs. Kennedy says he's not arguing to take the benefits away, and that's worth holding him to, because the real debate isn't whether the number looks good on a chart. It's whether the people behind the number can actually make ends meet. And on that question, $64,000 in mixed benefits on paper doesn't pay the rent if most of it is Medicaid you can't spend and housing aid.